with that, we've got our third individual, Daryl Holly, and Daryl won. I think on your first eligibility, you won the achievement award for best performing office for the quarter, and your first attempt out at a meeting last fall. I think that was the first time you competed, wasn't it, Daryl?
Yeah, it sure was. Yep.
And you're just like I'm just so proud of you, because you know what? You look for new ideas, you make a decision, and you implement. And when you started, I'll ask you the same question I asked the others. When you started working with us, what was the problem you wanted to solve most?
There were really two problems. One, I was really sick and tired of contingent searches. You do a lot of work and not get anything out of it. You're only placing 1 out of 5 or so, and it just seemed like such a waste. That was one key problem. The other was I wanted to scale the business, and I'd hire people. They didn't work out. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't scaling the way I wanted to. Those were probably the two big things that come to mind.
So when you talk, we'll start with the one you started with first, retainers. What were the things you had to shift, both from a mindset perspective and an approach perspective, that led you to getting money up front?
From a mindset perspective, I was at maybe 5% retainers before I started working with RecruiterU, and it was just getting past the idea of, I guess, asking for it, knowing how to ask for it, being willing to ask for a retainer. Some of that was, I guess, strategic because I didn't know how, but in other cases, there was some fear about asking for retainers because, well, it could just shut the whole deal down.
And what did you do to move past that?
Okay. Well, in terms of my first introduction to RecruiterU, I came across the retainer course, and I went through the retainer course. And I think you said it well. If I see something, I'll try it exactly as you say to do it. And I watched the retainer course, and within the first week, I got 3 retainers, and it's $25,000 cash in within 1 week after doing that $400 retainer course. Best ROI I ever had on any investment.
I need to charge royalties. And then your second challenge was on scaling and growing. And I know you have ambitious growth goals. What are the things you had to shift there to put in place? Because you said you were losing recruiters, you had turnover. What are the things you shifted there?
Probably the big shift was a focus on MPs and RPs versus hiring recruiters. And instead of thinking about, I've got to hire a recruiter, I've got to have X number of MPs and RPs, and splitting the work up so that I wasn't pouring, a 5-gallon bucket on a sponge and it was just, boiling off the sides. It's easier to train somebody to come in and just do recruiting and work their way up the ladder than trying to be full 360 recruiters right off the bat.
We're going to talk about more about that tomorrow in how to, for those that are interested in scaling upwards to build a team. But I want you to, they haven't been exposed to that yet. So when you talk about the focus of MPs and RPs, instead of saying hiring a recruiter, you knew how much production you needed from a first-time interview job order standpoint, correct?
That's
correct. Hit your revenue target. And then you said, to do that, I need X amount of human beings.
That's correct.
And what did you shift in your onboarding that increased retention?
Well, I started hiring people just to do recruiting candidates first. And I stopped using my franchises training program for one. I started training myself and getting people on the phone within 2 or 3 days versus 2 weeks of training and trying to be a 360 recruiter. I spent 2 days on the phone. 2 days training on, put them on the phone, and just focused on setting up appointments with me in the beginning. And then they grew into qualifying candidates and debriefing, but a steady state growth of skills versus trying to expect somebody to do everything right off the bat.
And when you taught them recruiting, obviously, then they're working on stuff that you've already generated, openings
that is correct.
You already generated. So they're getting interviews on stuff that's real. I mean, you're not putting new recruiters on your retained stuff, are you?
No, very rarely. I do most of that myself. My newest recruiters, no, I wouldn't put them on a retain. I'm currently, at the end of last year, I was 60% money down, retained search. The other 40% is mostly exclusive contingent search. But no, I wouldn't put them on a retained search right off the bat. No.
Because that's what, when people go, well, the big hesitancy I see when people want to break out to build a team is my reputation's on the line, right? I don't want to put them on a retainer. Well, no, you don't put a newbie on retainer. You put them on something that's, where you're not as accountable. What I used to put them on was a non-exclusive contingency, and I would let the employer know, because it was a non-exclusive contingency, I was managing the search, but I wasn't conducting the search. And it was, from a branding perspective, you don't get all of me when you don't give me money up front. What are some of the things you've done to, because I know you've had a couple of breakthroughs from both a mindset perspective and a consistency standpoint, the things you put in place at a firm level to ensure those things occur, the consistency.
A couple things. We have an annual plan based on the number of FTIs, and that's broken down by week. So, and we've broken that down even further into RP and MP targets for everybody in the firm. We actually look at our numbers daily. We know where we're at week to date, where we were at this morning versus our target to a week. We know where we're at year to date, but we all know our critical number in terms of FTIs, and everybody knows their numbers in terms of production, in terms of FTIs, as well as the MPs and RPs.
And when someone's off, what's the coaching you give them to course correct to get them back on target?
Well, I have a weekly call with, or actually a sit down with each recruiter. We do a couple things. One, we look at production, and then two, we look at quality. We listen to some calls. But on the production standpoint, sometimes I'll ask them, the same question you taught me to ask them, Mike. Did you really want to make that number that you told me you wanted to make this year? Because if you continue at this rate, sometimes I'll calculate it out before the meeting. If you continue at this rate, here's what you can expect this year. That's real shy of what you said you wanted to hit this year. So what are we going to do about it?
And it's a great technique. See, if I was, by nature, I'm not a confrontive person, right? So just to kind of give you some background on what Daryl's talking about. So I said, what has to be true for me to hold people accountable without being highly confrontive? And it was holding them accountable to their goals, right? So to Daryl's point of, you said you wanted to make 100,000, and maybe in my firm that was 300,000 in billings, right? So if they're on track for 240, I'd say, well, if their production for the week, FTI wise, presentation wise, this is it. You break it down by the week, and you're at based on last week, you're at a 240 run rate to bill, which means you're going to W2, I don't know, $70,000. Are you okay with that? Well, how can you say that, Mike, only after a week? Because anyone can go to you December 31st and look at your W2 and go, you made $70,000. We can both read, or we can fix it here in April, right? And that's what we're talking about, from using metrics to keep a firm and an individual, on track. Any other points on the things you picked up that you would recommend, Daryl, on scaling or transforming part of the business?
Probably the one thing that I'm working through right now is not my recruiters are all hitting the production targets, but you got to stay on top of the quality too. And it's something that I hadn't done well enough. And I've started listening to more and more calls and providing more detailed coaching. Well, I would have done this, or I would have done that right here. And actually we'll listen to a call, we'll stop it in the middle of the call and talk about it. I went and listened to quite a number of calls here recently, and I had to sit down, and my recruiter said, hey, we've been walking all over money. There were several points in these calls where they were just not asking for the sale. There was a job there that they just did not ask for the sale they could have gotten. And there were multiple examples that I had to show them specifically. You missed this cue right here.
it's amazing when you listen to calls, not every call, but kind of spot audits for training and coaching. Because if you really want to scale a team, it's for them, just like we talked about, Francis talked about it. These are blind spots. Nobody would just let a sales opportunity go by. They just didn't hear it. The reticular activating system, for whatever reason, wasn't dialed in. You, as the owner, who's billed a lot more, has that experience. Before we let you go, Daryl, any last minute kind of tips, things I didn't ask about that you would kind of give recommendations to the audience?
The other piece that come out of it, just going to the mastermind groups, every time I learn a tremendous amount, and I set 5 new improvement projects every 4 months from going to the mastermind groups that we go to, and I track those as well too. That's probably some of the best information that I've gotten out of the RecruiterU, just listening to other recruiters at the mastermind events. I pick up all types of little ideas, and then we'll come back. We'll try. Some of them work for us, some of them don't. But had I not been to those events, I would not have been exposed to that knowledge or that information.
Awesome. Well, Daryl, thanks so much. I appreciate your insights. And so just kind of sum up a couple quick things is, one, it's kind of shifting your thinking around getting deposits. Two, to create sustainability and consistency, monitoring, setting numbers, holding people accountable to their goals, and then checking in with them every week to keep them on target. It's just like those 4 futures lines we talked about before. If you wait 3 months, that drift, it's going to be a lot harder to get them back to where they want to be versus they slip a little bit in week 1. You can fix those habits easily in the first week. Thanks so much, Daryl. I appreciate all your insights.
No problem. Thanks, Mike.